Good morning. This is the Blaine's World webcast that can be found
Hi.
each week on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn, or you can also listen in on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And you get more information about previous shows and future shows at my website, which is behind me, blainesworld.net. I'm your host, Blaine Greenfield, and I'm here in my Zoom studio in lovely downtown Fairview, North Carolina. Each week, we focus on positive news and information about people and organizations in both Western North Carolina and throughout the country. And toward that end, it's my pleasure to introduce Ofri Hirsch, owner of Asheville Mountain Kitchen, for being my guest today. And feel free to wave to all your fans and friends who are watching this, Ofri. So you want to give them a big wave? That's Ofri. And I should mention that Ofri Hirsch grew up with the love of wholesome foods and cooking. She likes to say cooking is something that flows in her veins. After graduating 10 years ago with a master's degree program in urban design from Harvard University. So was it you were like the youngest person who ever graduated with that degree? You were like 16 then or 17 when you graduated that degree?
Yeah,
The
sure.
youngest of all time. But
I
that
graduated 20 years ago,
okay, well,
but
we'll
yeah.
talk about this as well from Harvard in urban design. So she's since then working then in the field of design and architecture until her path shifted, working with food and nutrition. She's the owner of Asheville Mountain Kitchen, a relaxed atmosphere celebrating the art and love of food and small group classes and team building sessions with plenty of hands-on experience. So the first question I ask Ofri when I speak to a guest is, in terms as a child, you grew up where?
I grew up in Israel. I was born and raised on a kibbutz, which is a self-sustaining sort of rural community,
Okay,
like a commune type thing.
okay.
Yeah.
And when you were growing up in the kibbutz, did you always know you wanted to run your own business?
No, no. I had no idea, honestly. It's a very different way of life, but there was definitely a lot of room for initiatives, um, you know. So yeah, we had to create everything. We didn't have, scouts, for example. We created our own activities after school, and um, we didn't buy any entertainment. We created it. So I mean, there is a lot of initiative in that.
Can you imagine the kids used to do that too? They created their own entertainment
Exactly.
that they
Yeah.
used to. They don't do that so much now. So what got you then from Israel then to eventually to Harvard?
It's a long story, but my family left Israel 30 years ago, and I left with them, and I studied landscape architecture. And I worked. I worked in an office, and we created basically an extension of the city in Melbourne, Australia, where my parents moved to and where I lived. And we worked for a very large developer. And through that work I did, um, I met someone at the company who said that they know this other developer who would like to send Australians to get educated in the United States because he thought it was very good education. And he himself graduated from Harvard and MIT. And he was based in LA, but his origin were in Australia. And he thought I was a good candidate to do that. And he was starting this scholarship. It was a new thing. And he introduced me to this philanthropist, and we toured Australia. We did these fundraising events. So he put some of the funds and then he raised the other half from various companies and corporations. And I was the first to go. So
Wow.
he basically offered me a free ride. I got some money from Harvard too, but anyway, it was an opportunity for me to go, and I never even thought about it, but it just became available all of a sudden.
Now, this was as an undergraduate or graduate.
So I went to graduate school at Harvard. Yeah.
Okay, so you
So I
done your
already
under,
was working in the field. Yeah.
so you were before that you were studying in Australia. You got
Yeah.
your degrees in Australia. So boy, that must have been some shift to go from
Hmm.
Israel to Australia, then to Harvard as a student.
Hmm.
How come you chose that was your major was in urban design? How come you chose that as your major?
Well, I think a lot of people are not completely sure what landscape architecture is, but it's landscape architects design anything but the actual building themselves. So they design spaces that are, outside, but it could also be bridges. It could be, um, sound walls along highways, neighborhoods, cities. And I really think it's one of the things that affect us the most. The built environment affects our lifestyle, our social connections, our health. Just has a major influence on it. So I was always kind of more interested in the bigger picture and how it affects the built environment rather than the nitty gritty of, what joint we need to build this or that, but more of the social impact of that.
So you were in that field for a couple of years, was it? And then you
Yeah,
moved
I
on.
was in it for a while. Um, well, I graduated in '06 from grad school, and I worked until '09 when the recession hit. And then I was let go. The office I worked for closed because our field, that field is very volatile and gets affected first in most cases. And I was let go, and then I resorted to cooking, which is something I've always done. Even while I was working in my profession, I cooked on weekends in restaurants. It's just something I've always done. It's been with me from since childhood.
Now, when you let go, where were you living at that time?
In Boston, in
Okay.
Newton,
So then
Massachusetts.
the question everybody's asked, so you're in Boston, let go, how'd you wind up in this area?
My husband and I moved with our son um, in 2015, just looking for a mellower life, easier, less, better weather, this kind of changing pace.
And so at that point in time, was that when you started your business?
So no, I didn't start it right away. I actually worked with a landscape architect who was based in Hendersonville for many years, and I really enjoyed working with him. It was sort of more of a freelance based thing, but I ended up running that office, and the house we bought just sort of seemed suitable for teaching classes. So I started teaching here and there very sporadically. And then I started getting calls for team building and all this and that. And then things got real busy, and I had to choose one or the other. And then I let go of the architecture and focused on the cooking. It worked very well with me to be home and experience my son's childhood. I enjoyed that. And for many years, it was really, really great, a great business.
And you were teaching cooking, like you said, primarily at your house. Was that traditional cooking classes, or were you then doing the team building stuff you did?
Both.
Okay. Because the first time I met you, I'd heard about this business, such a kind of a cool concept that, a lot of people teach cooking, but explain how team building ties into your teaching of cooking.
How what ties?
How team building ties into teaching
Oh,
cooking.
yeah. hmm So I think food is a connector, We all connect around food. Um, and it's the most inclusive thing because everybody eats and drinks. And when you look at team building, it's often something adventurous, maybe, or physical, and that doesn't always suit everybody in a company. Um, but cooking is just a very inclusive activity, um, and it's also indoors, so it's not weather dependent. It's fun, and it could be structured in many different ways. So I sometimes I do cooking classes, which are very informational, and I really teach people quite a bit. Um, and was told many times people have sampled classes all over the world that I really bring a lot of content into my classes. Or it could be something more experiential, such as like a cooking competition, I even bring design into it. So I often ask teams, like, for example, if we're doing an appetizer competition, they have to design an appetizer. So they come up with their own recipes. I give them ingredients, and they have to design an appetizer for an entity. And that could be a person, but it could also be the year 2025, or it could be Asheville, or it could be wherever they're from, or whatever. They, whoever they're dedicated for, they have to explain us why they're dedicating that particular appetizer to them. So they have to bring some thought process in a deliberate way. Yeah.
What's cool about what you're saying is that it sounds like people are also going to have fun doing this, which is kind of cool, right?
Correct. It's
What do you,
super fun.
yeah. And people actually laugh and none of that. They get to eat their product as well.
Yes, they get to eat it. So there's always a meal, They eat in the appetizer example, they eat the appetizers and then usually followed by a catered meal. Sometimes we cook the whole meal though together. And so many times I hear people say, I didn't think we'll have anything decent to eat and we end up with good food because I do make sure that, they don't,
I ask
yeah.
this of artists, but I'll also ask you as well, that when people come in, I guess some people probably tell you or you hear that they can't cook or they never cooked or they're not good at cooking. Do you ever hear that? People tell you that?
Hmm.
And what's your answer
Sure.
to it?
Yeah.
Can anybody learn to cook?
I think anyone can learn anything they set their mind to, but it's a team effort. So I think anyone can contribute in some way, even if they don't know. And sometimes they need a little start from me, a little push, and I kind of toss ideas with them. And we're always there to guide them. I have other people who help me, and it's fun, and often, they don't know what to make at all, and they just come up with something. So, yeah.
You mentioned there's something for everybody. I guess I could volunteer. I could be the taster. I could be the taste tester,
Yeah.
or I could
We're
be
always
the.
looking for judges, Blaine.
Oh, is that it? Okay.
So, yeah.
Actually, talk about that. So you actually judge the competitions?
Yeah, we judge the competitions.
Now,
And
who
I don't
does it?
like doing it as much, but sometimes I have to do it. Sometimes we nominate judges from within the group. Sometimes my employees judge it. It just depends. But it's super fun, and we always do it in really good spirit. And I mean, we usually just said, the two best. These are the two best, our favorites, our two favorite. But I don't go into ranking all of them or anything.
Well, I love the idea of competition. When you do that, how many people are typically involved in the competition? Like how many people can you take in a cooking class?
I've had up to 90,
How many? How many?
90, 90.
Wow, that's a lot of people cooking. Really? The
Yeah, but they divide them into groups. We use different hot plates, depending on where it is. I use different venues, but probably most commonly like 25, 30. That's more usually the size. And I think the competition aspect really gets men into it too. Well, not that men don't cook. Men cook, I think, just as much as women do, but they're more competitive, I think, and they like, and a lot of companies have a majority of male uh, employees. So
Now, do the competitions sometimes take place at your place, or how many people can you accommodate?
sometimes, yeah, I can have maybe, I'd say 25,
Oh, that many?
maybe the most.
Okay, super.
Yeah.
And so the classes, do they just one time or they go over a couple of weeks or how do the classes run?
I have a schedule. People could sign up and yeah, just come to a class. Just I sell them individually. And then I also do private groups. If there's a group that wants me, I could come to them or they could come here, a pre-organized group. That's fine as well.
If a company
Yeah.
did this, how many sessions would that be? Could it be more than one? Could it be over a couple of weeks?
Sure. Oh, yeah. And I've had companies that loved it so much, they flew me out to do it in Florida, and I could go do it in other places as well.
Okay, must be kind of a lot of fun, for the company itself, because again, I'm thinking of building, and some people object to it. There's sometimes dangerous things they do, or things that involve you
Hmm.
physically, and this just seems like a really fun kind of thing to do that
Hmm.
you're going to learn and grow from. So talk about then the process. So they're cooking, and then how does the teaching come in, or how does the education come in? Like during, after, or is that a separate part of it?
So yeah, like the competition is more of an experiential thing. So it's more about their own teamwork and dynamics. And some companies use that to really analyze their team also and the people and look at how people collaborate and who's taking charge and who's and I've had that used a few times as well. It's a great tool because you see right away, it's really a microcosmos of a work environment. You give them a task, you see how they do it. Are they staying within the parameters? Are they following the rules? Are they breaking the rule? Who's leading? Who's following? So that's the team building. The classes I teach, it's a hands-on experience. So everyone participates, but there's also a lot of content. I teach about spices. I really like this thing called first principle. Do you know what I
I've
mean?
heard of it. Yeah. Tell me about it. Yeah. What is it exactly?
Yeah. So instead of teaching you how to make, you know, uh, three different recipes for breakfast, a pancake and a French toast, instead of teaching just recipes, I teach of how flavors come together, how to understand, especially um, for different cuisines. So if I teach Thai cooking, how is the flavor being created? Really deconstruct it and show people how it's done. So to enable them a much wider use afterwards. So once you really understand how it's being created, you could then apply it to make many more dishes. You're not confined to three or four dishes you learn at a class.
How long would the class typically last? In other words, with both the cooking and the competition,
Three,
instruction, how long?
3 hours.
Okay. And that they
Yeah.
can go from soup to nuts, they can finish everything in the 3 hours?
Yeah, it's usually about 2 hours until they could eat. It's just arriving, settling in, using the restroom, getting a drink, getting an appetizer, gathering. Then we do some icebreakers and a little bit of introduction. And then we start the event, the activity, whether it's a competition or class. And there's ample time to really do the cooking, and then there's an hour to eat and talk and enjoy. People don't want to leave. That's the problem.
Well, also, do sometimes people get to take some of their product home? Does that happen as well?
Yeah, they could take it. They rarely do. I used to do also. Sometimes I do it still. Like we make extra and we bring it to as a donation. So we
Oh,
bring it to the veterans quarters. We used to and homes for women
very nice.
and children, things like that. But it was just way too much for me to do on my own,
Now,
all these donations.
in terms of doing stuff on your own, so people come into the group, I guess you could appoint or choose a leader, but you let the group decide that eventually, who the leader
Yeah,
is?
sometimes they divide them into teams. So they like to mix them up, like put it in a blender. And sometimes they ask me to do it. So then I give them numbers, and all the fives go left and all the twos go right and all that.
It must be
Yeah.
interesting for you to watch when they do it themselves, how does it determined, who's on what team and who is in charge, the leader of the team. It's interesting you talk about males not, necessarily doing the cooking. The people who wind up as leaders of the group, it'd probably be interesting to see that they're not necessarily the same. Are they the same as the leaders in the company, or sometimes they'll surprise you with who takes over
Yeah,
the
I don't
team?
know. I don't always know, but but I do think that that not necessarily, I think it's the people who feel most confident cooking, because some people really have no
Interesting.
clue at all. They could ask me, I'm never, you know, um, I can never be surprised. I mean, the questions that people ask me, are really basic, like is it tomatoes in red sauce, things like that. Like people don't know anything,
Well,
you
that would
know.
be me, or how to start something. Let me ask you this also. We're talking about the competition. I just love the idea of a competition. Talk about how these classes can be used for other groups as well. Like I assume p parties, people come to you to put on a party. Does that ever happen?
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, sure.
it'd be a great party. I once had years ago, I had a cooking party, but this would be a lot of fun for a group to have somebody's birthday or what's the most unusual
Yeah,
what's the
sure.
most unusual group you've ever put together?
Unusual
Yeah,
in what way?
well, it could be a party, but
Just
other
people.
than a party, have you done anything else? Have you done have you ever done a wedding, for example?
Yeah, so I've done rehearsal dinners.
Oh,
So I
really?
think it's such a great way to meet the other side and
What a great,
interact.
yeah, it'd be fun.
It's so much better than being, stuck in a restaurant and you're just between two people and there's only so much you can't hear usually. It's noisy and there's only so much you could talk to them. You don't know them, a lot of times. And I mean, I think it's so much more interactive and fun, you know.
Well, it would seem like all the
Um,
courses would tend to be interactive. Would that be so?
yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, the cooking classes is a little more instruction, but then it's a hands-on, so people talk and it's such a great connector. I mean, so many times people go out afterwards, because just with strangers they met at the class, and it's the greatest connector food, and um, I think some people look down at cooking. Oh, I don't cook. I'm good at ordering. And the
Right.
thing is that, cooking is a lot more than just, just the superficial part of it. It holds a lot of meaning for people. It creates a home, the smell, the togetherness, the creating something, the fact that you're creating something out of nothing kind of thing. It's very rewarding, I think.
You mentioned also you have classes, right? Other than the
Yeah.
competition. Talk about the kinds of classes
Hmm.
you offer.
So I teach cuisines from Southeast Asia, so Thai, Vietnamese, Indian, and then I also teach Mediterranean classes from all around the Mediterranean, so Moroccan, Northern African, Spanish, Italian, French, Balkan, Turkey, and the Eastern Mediterranean as well. Um, yeah, and I also have sometimes I do dinners. So I'm actually going to be a chef at a dinner in Flat Rock at the place I mentioned, Highland Cove Lake. Yeah, so sometimes I do that. It's for Valentine's.
Oh, very cool. How do you learn all these different cooking types?
Yeah. So, I mean, growing up in the kibbutz, I just learned basic skills. I would say pretty plain cuisine from Eastern Europe mostly. Um, but it's just been a passion of mine, a lifelong passion. I traveled extensively. I worked in Asia and lived in Australia, which is very Asian, strong Asian influence. But I visited Southeast Asia many times, traveled there, and I just learned. I learned from people, and I love um, home cooked food. This is really what I teach. I don't teach restaurant style food. I just learned from grandmas, from people who've been cooking their whole lives. And that's the food I like that warms my heart and it's comforting, um, and yeah,
You,
and healthy.
do you cover desserts as well?
I don't really teach baking at all, no. But we do have desserts. We have a full meal. We cook a full meal in the classes sometimes 5 dishes. Um, and we always have desserts. So simple desserts I do teach, but nothing complicated.
I'll put you on the
Yeah,
spot with a final question. Do you have a favorite
sure.
ethnic type food that you like teaching or preparing?
E- Ethnic. I love Indian food, but I think my favorite Asian would be Vietnamese because it's just so fresh, you know.
Okay, yeah, it's funny you said that. We just discovered um, a Vietnamese restaurant in Asheville. I'd never gone there before, but I enjoyed it. But I
It's
never had
good.
what? Yeah, so I
It's
never had it
good.
before. Vietnamese.
Wild ginger.
This was on, I don't know, it's on Hendersonville Road. I forgot the name
Yeah,
of
wild ginger.
it. It is, yeah, really enjoyed it. So it's the first time I'd ever
Yeah.
had Vietnamese cooking. Well, we have to bring Ofri to the area is some good Jewish cooking. There are, where everybody says what Asheville needs. They had years ago a good Jewish deli. You don't see good Jewish deli.
There's Zella's. You know Zella's?
No, I don't. Where is it?
Zella's. I was downtown briefly, and then they moved to Swannanoa, but they got destroyed in the storm.
Oh, really?
And it was the New York deli type
Really?
food. Yeah,
But it's been destroyed?
yeah,
What a shame. Yeah,
yeah,
where it says you need a
yeah.
good Jewish deli, we need also a 24-hour diner. You don't have that anymore. No such thing as a 24/7 diner.
Hmm. Yeah.
If folks want to get in touch with you, Ofri, to either learn about courses you're teaching or this team building stuff you do for companies and
Hmm.
organizations, what's the best bet?
Just through my website, email or call me. I also have a lot of cooking camps over the summer with kids. I teach kids,
And
and
you
those are
mentioned
filling up
you
quickly.
mentioned the website. What is that, please?
Asheville Mountain Kitchen
Okay, AshevilleMountainKitchen
dot com
dot
dot
com.
com.
And so that'll have all the information about stuff you're doing and
Yeah,
upcoming.
yeah.
And
Hmm.
since you mentioned it, you mentioned the camps for kids. What age range do those range?
9 to 14.
Okay. And so the when can you start teaching a kid cooking? 9 or even, well, you as a child, you learned a lot earlier than 9, I imagine.
Yeah, I think you start them all the time. The minute they, show interest, instead of pushing them out because you're tired and you're cranky, you should let them do something, let them do anything, just so they feel part of it. This is how kids learn. They copy us, they model themselves after us, and all kids love cooking. They all love, it's working with your hands, it's tactile, it's fun. You get to eat it.
Well, you said it, Ofri, and you're so right, because I remember that had been my daughter's favorite course in high school. She took a cooking course and she loved it.
Yeah.
They got to eat the stuff they made and she just had a blast on it. And so maybe that got her interested in cooking as well, but it's good stuff.
Hmm.
Anyway,
Yeah.
Ofri, Hirsch, I'd like to thank you for being my guest edition of the Blaine's World webcast. Also, I'd like to thank my producer, Cappy Dissetti, and hopefully I bumped into you. I said off the air about 5 or 6 years ago. Maybe I'll bump into you sooner than 5 or 6 years ago, or even meet you in a cooking class one day. That'd be great.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you so much for hosting me here.
Okay, Ofri, thank you. And let's see if I can just sign off.